Good morning. Sunday morning. All right, everybody. I'm Logan Alec. I'm a CPA, and this is my stimulus update for Sunday, December 20th. Finally, we have some good news about these negotiations. I'm not talking about Trump tweeting about stimulus checks for the billionth time. I'm talking about the fact that reportedly our friends in Congress have reached a compromise on the biggest thing that's been holding up a stimulus deal thus far, namely Pat Toomey's demand to permanently end the Fed's lending facilities instituted by the CARES Act. We've talked about the details of this issue over the past couple days. Not going to rehash it here, but I will tell you about how this compromise went down yesterday in a bit. First, though, I want to let you know that this morning on Fox News Sunday with Chris Wallace, the number 3 Republican Senator John Barrasso said this gets done today. Speaking of stimulus, he also confirmed what we've been thinking here on the channel about stimulus check amounts and eligibility. I will play you that clip later along with my thoughts on it. But first, let's talk about how the Pat Toomey thing went down yesterday. So yesterday, before this compromise was reached, former Fed Chair Ben Bernanke issued a public statement saying that the Fed's emergency lending authorities should be at a minimum as robust as they were before passage of the CARES Act, and that it is vital that the Fed's ability to respond promptly to damaging disruptions in the credit markets not be restricted. Keep in mind that Bernanke is now a private individual. Okay, I think he works for some private think tank now. This is Bernanke speaking for Bernanke. Okay. However, late afternoon yesterday in the Senate, Republican Senator Pat Toomey, who was the one who raised this big stink about the Fed lending facilities, and Democratic Senator Mark Warner, who is part of that bipartisan group, sat across from each other at a table along with nearly a dozen other senators. Their staffs had gone back and forth for days now trying to work this issue out to no avail. Now we get this bunch of senators in a room. And these senators, both Republican and Democrat, talked for about 10 minutes. Then Toomey and some other senators popped into Schumer's office. After half an hour in there, Toomey came out, said that a deal is possible. He and Schumer met later in the evening. The two traded language, and lo and behold, at 9:30 p.m. Eastern time last night, they reached this compromise regarding the Federal Reserve emergency lending facilities initiated by the CARES Act. This is huge, because what we've been hearing the past few days from both parties is that this issue is by far the biggest hurdle to getting a deal done. So now that it is dealt with, it clears the path for this deal to be finalized. So what was the compromise that Toomey and Schumer reached? Well, we haven't seen the language yet, but Republicans are positioning this as a victory for the taxpayers. According to Republicans, the remaining $429 billion in the disputed emergency facilities would be used to offset the latest relief bill. No surprises there. I think we're already assuming that, right? I think that's been kind of a given since Fed Chair Jerome Powell consented to Mnuchin's request. Republicans went on to say the facilities would be closed at the end of the year and can't be duplicated without congressional approval. So to me, and again, this is just the Republican side here, okay? It kind of sounds like Toomey almost got everything he wanted here, right? These facilities are going to close at the end of the year, and they can't be duplicated without congressional approval. Fed would have to go through Congress to reopen facilities like this. This morning, a McConnell spokesman said that now the Toomey issue is resolved, we can begin closing out the rest of the package to deliver much-needed relief to families, workers, and businesses. So what's left? Well, as of last night, members of Congress were still negotiating other things. For example, Nancy Pelosi told House Dems in a call yesterday, Democrats and Republicans are still divided on the food stamp funding. We know that small business funding, such as PPP, who's eligible for a second round of PPP, that is perhaps still up in the air. Some of the details of that, whether to or not to include some tax breaks in the deal, specifics surrounding the stimulus checks, who's eligible, who's not, the length of the unemployment, live venue assistance, all these things we've talked about over the past few days. Some of them are still up in the air, right? So some things still need to be worked through, but hopefully these items will be worked through today and we will have a deal. Last night, after reaching an agreement with Pat Toomey, Chuck Schumer told reporters that if things continue on this path and nothing gets in the way, they'll be able to vote tomorrow, i.e. today, Sunday. That's obviously best case, right? It would mean this bill that we still haven't seen yet, and I think many in Congress still haven't seen yet, would have to be finished up and agreed to by the top dogs in Congress today, presented to the rest of Congress, and voted on. House Dem leadership announced today that the House will meet at 12 p.m. They're expected to vote on government funding and further coronavirus relief legislation, hopefully in the afternoon, if not this evening. Now, if this thing has Pelosi's blessing, I don't think passing in the House will be any issue. Simple majority, done. There's no filibustering in the House, by the way, because there's a time limit on how long you can talk on the House floor. Senate, no such rule. So Senate is a completely different story. Will we see Bernie Sanders hold things up today or whenever this bill is voted on in the Senate? Hopefully today, maybe tomorrow. If he does not see substantial direct payments in the bill, I'm leaning toward no, based on his withdrawing his objection on Friday. but we will see what transpires today on the floor of the House and the Senate as well. Keep in mind that, as I told you earlier in this video, the number 3 Republican senator this morning said about stimulus, this gets done today. Here's the clip.
Joining us now from Capitol Hill, the number 3 Republican in the Senate, John Barrasso. Senator, where do we stand on COVID relief talks? I understand there's a lot of parliamentary rigmarole, but what are the chances that all sides will sign on to an agreement today?
This gets done today. No more delays. We're not leaving until we have relief for the American people. People are hurting, people need help, and there are 2 things we need to do to write this final chapter on coronavirus. And the one is to get people vaccinated. We're doing that now. 20 million people will be vaccinated by the end of this, by New Year's Eve. But we need to provide help for the American public, people who've been struggling, until we get enough people vaccinated that we can fully get the economy back on track. And that means people back to work and kids back to school. So direct payment checks to the American people, $600. For people who are watching, Chris, if they got a check last time, they will get a check again this time, adults and children. For people who are out of work through no fault of their own, $300 a week for enhanced unemployment going into next year. And for the small businesses and the working families all across America, we were going to do more paycheck protection loans so those small businesses can stay open, so people can get paychecks all the way through. This has been a very successful program. 13,000 small businesses in Wyoming have used this program. It's a little more specific this time in that the business has to be fewer than 300 employees, and they actually have to show a loss. But that's the way we get this disease behind us.
Barrasso said this gets done today, no more delays, so that's great. Probably a bit optimistic, but I love the enthusiasm. Barrasso brought up vaccinations, the need to carry the American people through until enough people are vaccinated to get the economy back on track. Now, that's an interesting turn of phrase from a Republican, right? Because we've essentially gone from Republicans saying, oh yeah, the economy's doing great, you know, we're on a V-shaped recovery, to now, yeah, the economy's actually not going to be back on track until we get mass vaccination, right? So that's a step in the right direction from a Republican senator. Now, on the stimulus checks, interesting choice of words. He said that if you got a check last time, you'll get a check this time, adults and children. What about if he didn't get a check last time, right? Because we heard reports last week that maybe adult dependents would be eligible for stimulus checks this time around. We also heard that mixed status families, right, the citizen spouse in that relationship, citizen children in that relationship, could possibly also be eligible for stimulus checks this time around. That's a Marco Rubio proposal. He didn't specify, right? When he said adults and children, I kind of leaned toward he meant, yeah, adults and dependent children are eligible for checks, right? Just like under the CARES Act. I don't think he was specifically referring to adult dependents and dependent children there. But again, folks, we haven't seen the bill, right? Until we see the bill, we don't know, right? Unemployment, $300 a week. That's what we've been hearing. Consistent with that, he didn't specify the length. Okay, bipartisan proposal wanted 16 weeks. We've been hearing that Republicans have been pushing for as little as 12, 13, maybe even 10 weeks. He brought up PPP eligibility under 300 employees this time around and have to show a loss. I imagine that's, you know, comparing Q2 2019 to Q2 2020, something like this. That's what we've been expecting based on previous Republican language, as well as what that bipartisan proposal was pushing for. Then Chris asked about Trump's tweet from last night telling Congress to give people more money. Here's a clip.
I want to just hone down on one point specifically. I know that you worked out the issue about emergency lending authority to the Fed, but then just after midnight this morning, President Trump said he wanted to see the direct payments higher, bigger than the $600 to each American who got one last time. I take it you're not going to go along with changing that part of the program.
We need to get this done today. The president is right in that this is no fault of the American people. Chris, we should have done this months ago had not Nancy Pelosi played politics through the fall because of the presidential election. She's admitted as much. We've had a bill pretty comparable to what we're going to pass today, and we've offered it by Republicans time and time again. The Democrats beat it down 40 different times. This has been wrong. The delay has been too long. We need to get it done now for Christmas.
So Barrasso didn't really answer the question, did he? He kind of just took it as an opportunity to take a shot at Pelosi and the Dems. And don't get me wrong, criticisms of Nancy Pelosi right now and how she handled negotiations with Steven Mnuchin are completely justified at this point. But Barrasso here is saying that Republicans had a bill pretty comparable to what they're going to pass today. Strong language, by the way, there again. What we're going to pass today is basically predicting it will pass today. But back to my original point, Barrasso is saying that Republicans have had this bill similar to this one that they're offering now. They've offered to Democrats time and time again. I don't know about that, right? The only Republican bill in this ballpark was the HEALS Act, and that wasn't even a unified bill. It was like a bunch of different bills. And then after the HEALS Act, McConnell and Republicans became obsessed with the skinny bills, right? So a little bit of revisionist history there, okay? But, Repub's going to Repub, Dem's going to Dem. They're going to find a way to criticize the other party, even if they have to kind of revise history a bit for their own purposes. Anyway, though, point is, we now have a top-ranking Republican in the Senate, basically confirming at this point $600 stimulus checks, same eligibility as last time, and using very strong, very positive, very specific language to describe what he thinks will happen with this bill. Basically said he thinks it's going to pass today. Again, knowing Congress, that sounds incredibly optimistic to me, but regardless, things are on the right track here, it's sounding like, and finally getting a deal done. All right, folks, that is what I have for now. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.